The opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and don't necessarily reflect the views of WOWT.
Thank you for joining us once again for the latest edition of the Beckett's Talking Podcast. And it's brought to you, of course, by the great folks out of the Vanna Garage. You know, I was just out there the other night. We were just sitting around having a cigar and a cocktail and some conversation with some friends I hadn't seen in a while. It was a great way, especially now that the weather's gotten nice. It's a lovely outdoor patio. You can go and enjoy yourself. So I wholeheartely suggest you're in the old market. Maybe you're going down for a play or a show, or you just want down to enjoy the lovely park. Hey, make part of your plans to spend some time at Havana Garage in the old market. Tell Chaz that I sent you. Anyway, I'm very interested in today's podcast. My guests are Fred Uhe and Ron Elwell. Fred is on the board of is one of the board of directors of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Sarpy County, and Ron is is actually the executive director of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And I'd known about the memorial. I'd seen it in the newscast and all that. Oh yeah, we got that. Okay, fine, whatever. And I never really paid much attention to it, but I don't get out that far to Sarpy County that often, so I didn't pay much attention to it, but I knew that we're getting ready for this. And so I went to check it out. I got to tell you, it's impressive as hell.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. It's the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. It's very impressive, and it's something that everybody ought to go and check out. But, Ron, you're not old enough to be a Vietnam vet.
That's correct.
All right. And how did you get involved with this, and why are you involved in this?
It's a wild story. So when I first retired out of the military, March 4th of 2020, COVID, I went into insurance and didn't know anything about networking, and my buddy from junior high had run across him. And he would always take me around to these networking things, and he would always introduce me as, hey, this is my buddy Ron, 22-year Army vet, multiple combat tours, And I would be like, stop, don't do that. So we were at this networking event actually at one of the hotels in Sarpy County, and didn't know what we were doing it for. And the Chamber of Commerce gave a $5,000 check to Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Memorial Foundation. And there's these two gentlemen sitting there with Vietnam veterans hat, and I got my buddy, I said, Carlos, come with me, and I'm going to show you what really you should be doing. And so I went up to which was George Abbott, Tom Brown. So Tom Brown was our president, and George used to be our secretary. And I went up to him and I said, hey, welcome home, and thanks for your service. And Carlos was like, said the same thing. And then Tom says to me, what'd you do in the Army? I said, well, I worked on helicopters. I started on Hueys and Cobras, and then I flew Blackhawks, went into Chinooks, pretty much the whole gamut. And they said, well, we've got this Huey that we need help with restoration, and we don't have anybody that knows how to fix helicopters. We got jet guys. And would you be willing to take a look at it and see if you can help? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Where's it at? And they're like, oh, it's at Council Bluffs Airport. I'm like, not a problem. Yep, I'll go up there, take a look at it. What I didn't know was that helicopter was not in the best of condition. It was missing a tail boom, and it needed a lot of work, needed rotors. So I started leading the restoration on the helicopter. And from there, a couple of months after we got the helicopter finished, so that was about a year or two, they said, hey, would you like to be on the board? I said, sure. So I came on board, never been on a board before. I've been in the military. Yeah. And so did that for about 6 months, and then they said, man, we really need an executive director. And so I laughed, and I said, well, you know what you need? They go, well, the board can't pay health insurance. I said, well, what you need a retired veteran that has benefits, and then you're good. And they all turned and looked at me. And I was like, what did I just say? So a couple days later, I get a call, and they're like, hey, would you consider being the interim executive director until we figure this out? And Memorial hadn't been built yet. Construction hadn't even started. And I was like, I don't know anything about nonprofits, right? And they're like, that's for the best. You'll figure it out. I'm like, okay.
And so there you are now.
There I
am. Fred, how did you get involved in this? I mean, because you're basically a man about town. You're involved in a lot of different things around the city. How did you get involved with the Vietnam Veterans Memorial?
Well, in my previous life, when I was director of tourism for Sarpy County, that was something we were naturally promoting, and I had helped done some fundraising, so I was kind of off on the side. The dedication last summer, I was involved in finding lodging, working parking logistics, and just kind of part of the team on making that happen. And then Actually, when I had retired from the county, this is one of the first calls I got. Ron's like, we want you. And it's like, what do you mean you want me? And that's when they suggested I come on the board and kind of use some of my background with community groups and nonprofits and marketing.
And and I never would have thought about having you on the podcast, quite honestly. But I saw your post on LinkedIn that you were now on the board. And I said, oh, yeah, why wouldn't I have you on? Now, that helicopter that you talked about, that's on display at the memorial. By the way, if you don't know where the memorial is, it's in Sarpy County, right there next to the Sumter Amphitheater.
Yep, 108th and 370.
108th, 370. If you're going out to a Storm Chasers game some evening, stop by beforehand and check it out.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it really is. I mean, we all know about, of course, we just celebrated, celebrate is maybe not the right word, we just acknowledged the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. I grew up during that era, but I was the first year that they still did the lottery. They still did the lottery, but they weren't taking anybody. So I never had to make the decision about whether or not I would go if I would be drafted. And quite honestly, to this day, I don't know what I would have done. Because I don't know that I would have been good in the military, quite honestly. But I respect the people that served, and I respect it so much. So it was, very in tune with the Vietnam vets and memorial and all that. I'd been to the wall in D.C., but the first time I went to a Vietnam Veterans Memorial, it was one of the traveling wall that went. And one of those nights I just couldn't sleep. So I said, you know what? I'm going to check out the wall, because it was open 24 hours and all lit up and that. I went and checked out the wall, and I saw 2 beat up beer cans, Budweiser cans, in a plastic bag with a note saying that they were going to drink those beers when he came home, and he didn't. And I started crying, because, I mean, that war, if you're a boomer, that war really helped define you. And if you're younger, you say, well, why would I care about this? It's great because it's not just, oh, here's a helicopter. You go through explain what you've got there, because all the different monuments that you've got.
Yep.
It was a very interesting design.
Yeah, so actually the way the memorial was set up to be confusing, because the Vietnam War was confusing. And our mission is to help remember and educate. So each obelisk covers every year of the war, and on one side of the obelisk is what was happening in the United States, culturally defining the U.S. And on the other side of the obelisk is major missions and things that were happening in Vietnam. Some Medal of Honor recipients are on those, because we have a couple of Medal of Honor recipients from Nebraska. And then the helicopter, that's just an iconic view of the Vietnam War. And there's a really cool story behind that helicopter. And then, of course, the honor wall, the big black wall, that honors all 396 plus the 4 sailors that died from the state of Nebraska. And it's pretty powerful. And actually, what a lot of people don't know is one of the names on our wall that was killed was actually the first person killed in the Vietnam War.
Oh, really?
Yep, he was from Nebraska.
I didn't know that.
Yep, Dale Boos.
And that would have been what, like 1950?
Yeah, I believe it's 1959.
Yeah, 1959. That's what I found so interesting about it, because you're right. It covers not just the war, but that whole era.
That whole era.
Which was a confusing time, because you not only had the protests against the war, you had race riots, civil rights movement was going on. You had, although you had some great music, the music of that era, was great. But you go and you explain that whole, basically 2 decades almost, right?
Yep.
Let's see, it was about 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A decade and a half.
A decade and a half or so, yeah, of that era. And it goes more than just, here's a soldier's name who may rest in peace.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that idea?
It was actually, I like to tell this story, and Fred's heard me tell this story before, but so I wasn't involved at the time, but 4 veterans from Vietnam sitting around drinking a beer, telling lies like they do. And they come up with what I call the good idea fairy, hits them in the head. And they said, hey, Nebraska is the only state out of all 50 states not to have a memorial for the Vietnam War, solely for the Vietnam War. And so they were like, we need to build one. They were thinking maybe 130, 500,000, somewhere in there. $7.2 million later, you have the one at Papillion. But yeah, they just sat around and realized that, hey, Nebraska did not have one, and we need to recognize the 396 plus the 4 sailors that were killed over there in Vietnam and make sure that their memory is lasting. And then to educate people about the war and the culture that what you were speaking about with the Democratic National Convention, obviously the assassinations that transpired, those things. So they said, hey, how can we do this? And they got Bellevue University on board, which was a tremendous support, and started kind of rolling from there. And then they built the board, and they started coming up with plans, and this is history.
One thing Fred, I thought was interesting about this, the QR codes that's on all the monuments.
Correct.
And that you can go and get more in depth, and it's not right. It's more than just names.
Yep.
It's about the era. Now, Fred, I'm guessing you and I are similar age. Did ever take a few years?
We are actually.
You also did not serve in Vietnam.
I did not. You and I must be the same age, because I was in the group of 18-year-olds that had the last lottery number. What was your number?
You know what? I don't know. I thought about checking that out online before we set up this interview, but I don't remember what that was, because I knew it wasn't going to be an issue when I went. When they drew the numbers, I knew it wasn't going to be an issue, so it didn't stay with me. But I know that anybody that did get drafted, they know that number by heart. They never forget that number.
Mine was 55, and
wow.
They had gone up through 110 the prior year. And of course, you're starting your adulthood and talking to counselors at school, and they're like, if this doesn't get settled, you might be vacationing in beautiful Southeast Asia. So, that's where, So I was touched by it. I had friends. I had a good friend that actually died of Agent Orange complications. He had served in the '60s, and a couple of PTSD folks. One was a suicide. I had a Vietnam vet open up finally and crying in my arms, and there's a whole things where tough guys don't cry, they don't hug, but. There was a lot of pent up, and as like Ron said, to me what was really frustrating is like, why was Nebraska last? Now, I've had out-of-state visitors say you guys may be last, but yours might be the best. And we had a tremendous honorary committee. I mean, people like Bob Carey, Chuck Hagel, Hal Dobb, also helping out with the project. So, when I first saw the renderings, I thought, it was tough getting my arms mentally around what it was going to look like. And then as construction developed, I mean, it is pretty cool.
Well, that's just it. I mean, because, you mentioned Vietnam Veterans Memorials, what the other ones are doing, what other ones have done. So when I saw the news stories, I saw the news story of the helicopter when it was dedicated, a friend of mine, Clay Michaels, was there. He was a helicopter pilot during the war. I don't know if he was a pilot, but I know he was involved with the helicopters during the war. Another friend, Dutch Haling, also, may he rest in peace, was also a part of the helicopters back in Vietnam. But I saw those stories, but I just thought it was like, okay, another memorial. Memorial Park. I love Memorial Park. It's beautiful, but it doesn't have the history that your park has.
Yeah, and that was intentional. Especially, I always say this: if you look at May of 1975 or April of 1975, and then you look at Afghanistan and the withdrawal, it looks fairly similar, right? If we don't learn from our past, we're not going to be able to undo or make the same mistakes again. So we've got to make sure, I tell everybody, my generation, the GWAT veterans, so Iraq, Afghanistan, we stand on the shoulders of giants from Vietnam veterans, because there was a lot of lessons learned that we applied in Afghanistan and Iraq. And so if we don't tell that story, we don't make sure that the general public knows it, then it's just going to get repeated.
What type of response do you get, both from Vietnam vets and from those who were too young to even remember the war? Yeah,
well, I'll tell you, this weekend we had a lot of veterans my age came up from Afghanistan, Iraq, motorcycle group came up, and they were just blown away how beautiful it is, how powerful it is seeing it. And then the Vietnam veterans, we've had guys from all across the country come see this, and I'll be up there cleaning or changing flags, and it'll be not uncommon to see a guy in tears looking at everything there, you know. And then we have sound to the helicopter, and they'll hit the button, and that really triggers an emotional
That's
response.
what I was going to tell, because I was there one time, and the gentleman pressed the button and ended up dropping to his knees and started crying. So the impact of that sound on that individual, I mean, you know, who knows what he went through.
If you weren't a part of that era, I think it may be hard for some people to understand just the impact that war had on that generation. I was a paper boy, and I remember on the front page of the Columbus Dispatch, every day there'd be the war tally. How many Viet Cong died, how many Americans died.
Yep.
Now, I don't know if the numbers were accurate as far as the Viet Cong or for the Americans for that number, because, you know, a lot was hidden during the Vietnam War. The government wasn't always the most forthcoming when I talked to about what was going on over there. But I do remember just seeing those numbers every day, and it had a lasting impact on me, you know, to this day.
Mayor Dave Black talks about that too. So if you ever hear him talk about the memorial, he'll tell you he recalls watching the evening news and seeing the names at the bottom of the screen, you know, come across, and he was like, that was just so powerful to him. You know, and there's a lot of people that we speak to.
Well, it's the first war that was probably broadcast. I mean, I think of Dan Rather being over there on the evening news, and I mean, you're right. That's, you know, government lied at times, and it just I think America lost a little bit of innocence, and it
definitely changed America. Yeah, I mean, because for one thing, it's the first war that we didn't win. You know, I mean, you know, we didn't win. I mean, the best you could say it was a tie. You know, I mean, and so there wasn't that rah-rah spirit they had after World War II. My dad was a World War II vet. I went down to 1 million Veterans Day parades and events, and been out of the American Legion post countless times. So I have, you know, a great affection for that. But the Vietnam vets, they didn't get that what the World War II guys got.
They didn't get any of that.
Yeah, and there was no big picture of kissing in Times Square because they won.
Right.
It was, and you mentioned earlier about some of the soldiers with the PTSD and with the suicide, but you also mentioned Chuck Hagel and Bob Carey. It's always fascinated me how some of the veterans came back and became the Bob Careys, the Chuck Hagels, you know, and did such great works to serve their country in other ways, and build up, you know, nice careers, and others who came back just broken shells of a man.
Yeah.
I don't know, you know, is there any way to know what causes that? I mean, you know, how some do better than others? I mean,
war changes you. You know, I tell everybody, my first combat experience was at 19 years old, and from 19, I went from 19 to a 60-year-old man. I mean, you see some very profound things that you can't unsee. It never goes away. My dad once said to me, when I came back from it was either my first tour or second tour, he said, son, you never get used to it, you learn to manage it. And I think some people don't know how to manage it, so they do other things, get into drugs, alcohol, and there's those of us that are like, okay, we got to deal with this, but let's go do better things and keep serving our country and the people around our communities. So I think it's just always having a mission, and that's what changes the difference. If you don't have a mission, because when you come out of the military, you take that uniform off, it's like you've lost an identity, you know. And it's been for me, it was 22 years. I didn't know any better. I didn't even know what kind of clothes to wear.
Uh-huh.
You know, where was I going to wear to work? Green, or green, and army boots, right? That was it. And now I have to buy a wardrobe. So you really have a loss of identity. And I think some guys, you know, coming back that see a lot of that stuff, they have a hard time with that, because no longer do you have the culture of being around your buddies, people you can confide in, that understand that dark sense of humor, that laugh in the worst of situations. Because everybody's like, oh, well, combat's got to be terrifying. Well, that's about 30 seconds. Most of it is we're messing with each other, joking around. You know, there's a lot of weird stuff that happens.
A lot of boredom, I would imagine.
A lot of boredom.
A lot of boredom, but then, boy, when the excitement hits, it really hits.
It hits, and it hits full force.
How are you doing? I mean, because you've seen war. You've been there. We talked about, the troubles that some soldiers have. I think what the figure is 22 soldiers commit suicide a day.
Yep.
We have a serious problem with homelessness in veterans. You obviously are doing, at least from the outside. From the outside, you're doing okay. Yeah. But did it take more than just learning what clothes to wear?
Yeah, it really did. I had to force myself to go to counseling. And I didn't realize I had a lot of stuff pent up that I just never, because I didn't talk about it. I talked to my buddies about it, the guys that I served with, but I didn't talk to anybody else outside of there about it. So I had to force myself to go into counseling, which has been a great help, but I still have anxiety. I hide as much as I can, but it's definitely hard. And actually the number of suicides has gone up because Vietnam veterans now are the larger number of suicides, a greater portion of suicides, because now they're reflecting back on their life of things that they probably hadn't thought about in 50 years. And so that number is ticking on the uptick.
Oh, I never thought about that. Yeah, because you're right. Because you get out of the war. You put on the suit. Yep. You go and you sell insurance, or you do whatever you're going to do, and you're raising a family and all of that. Then all of a sudden you get to an age where you're not working anymore.
Your family's moved out.
The kids are gone, and you're thinking, who am I?
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that. Wow.
I hear a lot from, so I've made really good friends with most Vietnam veterans, especially from around the country, looking at the memorial and being there and seeing it. One of the things that this one gentleman said, who was actually right next to our Medal of Honor winner, James Faust, sorry, not winner, recipient. I didn't mean to say that. He was right there next to him. He lives in Tennessee now. His name is Larry Reed. And he said one of the most profound things to me in an email that really made me cry. He said, I went to Vietnam alone, and I came home alone, and I'm still alone. And I thought, oof, no, you're not.
But deep down they are.
Yeah, deep down they are.
I mentioned my dad, World War II vet. He was also past commander of American Legion Post No. 1. And he was always frustrated because he couldn't get, we're going back a number of years now, he couldn't get the Vietnam vets, he couldn't get the Desert Storm vets. They weren't joining the Legion the way that the World War II vets did. And he never understood this until years later. I was interviewing a gentleman who came back from the war and was dealing with PTSD. And I asked about that. I said, why aren't you guys joining the Legion? Why aren't you joining the VFW? And he says, because your dad's generation didn't go to counseling. Yeah. We go now and we talk about it. We deal with this more so. Whereas the World War II vets, they would go to the VFW, they would go to the Legion Hall and have a beer and talk about how bad the food was.
And that's their counseling.
That was their counseling. They would be around others like them, and that was their counseling. But, they never really, and they would never really talk about what they saw.
Well, I think one of the challenges is, you mentioned earlier, we won World War II. So there's that kind of pride and thing. Yeah. So I think some veterans I've talked to are like, what was it? What did we accomplish? And, so when you don't have that sense of pride, and, I think, Ryan can attest to this level of VA services, I had a situation with a semi-homeless gentleman that was from the Navy. Not sure all what he did, but he finally one day says, I had PTSD before it was cool. I thought, what kind of a concept?
That's not funny, but it is.
Yeah. It is. It touched me because it's like, it's just like, it's probably, because, the old just, hey, suck it up. But now, there's some good counseling and stuff going on, but maybe not enough.
Well, there's not enough counseling for anybody.
Society.
Society in general. Now we've done topics on here about mental health and that, and mental health is a major concern. So many problems, whether it be homelessness, violence, domestic violence, drug and alcohol use, can be solved with, or at least bettered with, better mental health counseling, which I guess brings me up. This maybe not your area of expertise, but what is there counseling available? What counseling is there available for veterans in general?
So if you're service connected, you can go to the VA, and I think you can go to the VA even without being service connected for counseling. I'm fairly certain of that. But and I know like Bellevue University, DAV offers counseling. Bellevue University has a vet center that you can go in there and you can seek counseling. And there are some free items, but it's a work in progress. I still to this day I've been going to counseling for 4 years now, and I go once a month religiously. Don't miss a date whatsoever. Even if I feel great, don't have anything to talk about, I still go.
That's good. I mean, but was there part of that soldier mentality, that macho soldier mentality, if you will, that says, I'm not going to go and I'm not going to share my feelings. I don't want to address it. It's just easier to bury it inside.
Yep.
And some
100,000%. Yeah, because it's just easier to try and deal with it and not have to explain it to anybody else and just let go and hope that it stays in that crevice in your brain and it never comes back up. Well, unfortunately, it comes back up. It comes back up and manifests itself in different ways that you don't realize is actually happening to you. So it's a challenge to figure out and to force yourself. Like I said, I had to force myself to go to counseling because same thing, and I think Vietnam veterans did that, World War II veterans did that. That's why they don't talk about it. And now like having a memorial or having a space that you can go and sit and reflect and have your brothers and sisters there and be able to talk to them. And, that helps you get into that counseling. And right now, like the VA is starting to see a lot more Vietnam veterans enter into counseling.
We are fortunate in this area, though. We've got a very good VA.
We are.
I mean, a lot of places the VA is not as good as we have here in the Omaha area. So we're lucky in that regard.
Well, if you go to our website, you're seeing kids from all across the state that went to war. And so if you're out in some of the rural areas in Nebraska that don't have the services, it does become more of a challenge.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I got to do one more quick mention here about Havana Garage. I got a few more questions I want to ask you. Havana Garage in the Old Market. This is a segue for you, huh? Havana Garage is a great place to go and just sort of relax, take it easy, have a cigar. Even if you don't smoke cigars, you can enjoy yourself. Even if you don't drink, you can enjoy yourself. Have a cigar, relax, take it easy, have a good conversation with friends. They got a nice outdoor patio now. They have live music often on the weekends. They've got just a great vibe in the place. It's the old Rat Pack. You'll see pictures of Dean and Sammy and, of course, old Blue Eyes himself there, the chairman of the board. It's just a nice place to go, relax, and appreciate some of the finer things in life. Check it out, Havana Garage in the Old Market. So we're talking about the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Sarpy County. And when I was there was a family there checking it out. And the kids were probably, I'm guessing, anywhere from like 10 to 15, about 4 kids in the family. And they were looking at it. Why should anybody that wasn't around during the Vietnam War, why should anybody that, wasn't there, doesn't care about it, why should they go and visit?
I think it's important to go there and visit for educational purposes. Understand, all those names on that wall, there's families still alive.
Yeah.
That was their brother, sister, uncle, dad that are still alive to this day. And it's a good way to remember that there's a sacrifice that's made by every man and woman that was in Vietnam or service period, even if they were just an era veteran and never went to Vietnam. I think it's good for them to take kids and go up there and read about what was culturally happening in the United States, what was happening in Vietnam. Some of the most profound things that we've got today have come because of the Vietnam War.
Like what?
Just technology. So, we don't use maps and compasses anymore. We got GPS, right? And the military evolved based off of these different systems. Well, now a lot of that military technology got brought into the civilian world. I mean, I'm sure you guys can both remember where GPS wasn't attainable in the civilian world, or if it was real expensive.
Right.
The military kept growing based off of what we learned in Vietnam of like, hey, how does a helicopter fly at night with no night vision goggles in a place that's very dark with no moonlight and navigate to these different small bases to resupply them. How do you get there? And that was a finger on a map with a little red light and hope and pray the enemy didn't see it and shoot you down.
Just using it in my civilian life. Yeah. It's like I used to have the old Radford McNally Atlas, and you would go and you'd see the exit on the interstate, number 322 or whatever, but now you just plug it in the phone, put it on the Bluetooth, and that tells you where to go. And now that technology, which I think is also something that younger people don't appreciate, was what was happening, and that's one thing that your memorial also focuses on. What was happening as far as the technology and as far as the changes in how we were living our lives, because it was the start of this whole new age that we're living in today. Yeah. We're living in today.
The space race.
Chuck Hagel made a comment that's really stuck with me. You look at how divided this country is today, then think back to the 60s, again with the race riots and the assassinations, political upheaval, the 68 Democratic Convention in Chicago. It's just like, learn your history because we're going to repeat it probably. Yep. And there's so many similarities. We're not involved in a war right now. That could change any given day. But, there's just so much to learn. And, what I enjoy when I've gone there too you can tell some veterans just want to be left alone. They'll go sit on a bench and, alone with their thoughts. And you kind of wonder what's going through their minds, what they're reliving. But I've picked up the sense of who maybe, hey, I thank you for your service is appropriate versus I'm not going to talk to you because you're in your own private space, wherever that may be.
And again, I know we're talking about the Vietnam War, but from my own personal experience, I took my dad to see Saving Private Ryan. Yeah. And at this time, he was a man in his late 70s, early 80s, and he never really talked much about the war. When I asked him about it, he just said he was a cook. Well, I found out afterwards he fought in the Battle of the Bulge. Oh, geez. And after seeing Saving Private Ryan, I took him to see Saving Private Ryan, and he started opening up to me about some of the stuff he saw in war. And if it would have been either of your fathers, I could have asked a million questions. And I regret this to today. Because it was my dad, I couldn't do it. Because all of a sudden my dad was just showing how vulnerable he was and showing that side that I'd never seen before. Yeah. And I don't think the average person understands who'd never fought in war just what veterans like you and, those of other wars carry with them after the fact.
Yeah, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
It never goes away. I mean, I have memories that, we have a board member that we go out and have beer together and Fred joins us, and we tell stories between each other. And most people don't get to hear those stories because it's just what we talk about internally. My dad did multiple tours in Vietnam and actually never even talked to me about Vietnam until I went through combat myself. And then guess what? Now there's a relationship there, right? But he didn't talk to my mom about it, doesn't talk to my sisters about it. Like, he's very quiet, does not say anything about it. And that's what we need to focus on changing and educating people on, like, hey, if you learn about this stuff, then you know what questions to ask your Vietnam veterans if you know what was going on.
How do people react? We talked earlier about, how soldiers, when they came back from Vietnam, how people reacted to them. And it was not the most warming. Right. How are they reacting to soldiers of your generation? When they come back now, is it...
So one of my favorite sayings, Mick Wagner, if you're out there listening, Mick, this is your saying, but he would always say in these presentations we do about the memorial, when we came back from war, people were throwing beers at us and congratulating us. When those guys came back from war, they were spitting on them. Yep. So right now, America has changed due to the Vietnam War. They've embraced the soldiers and realized that the soldier's just a tool. It's not the politicians are the ones making the decisions. Yeah. And so I think America has shifted its mindset. And it really kind of started with the Gulf War, I think, is where it was a little bit better from there on. And it's just gotten, everybody walks around and says, thank you for your service. And we have to think about what to say next, So I always say, thank you for saying that. Yeah. And thank you for being here, holding down the home front while we're gone.
Okay, details now. One more time, details about the Sarpy County Vietnam Veterans Memorial. It's on 100.
I'm going to actually correct you. It's the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans. I mean, it's located in Sarpy County, but really this is for all Nebraskans. So
Okay, all right, you're right. I stand corrected. We'll edit that part out so I don't look like a fool. No, you won't. Okay, so the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And by the way, why Sarpy County? Why not just have another? Why not put that same thing over at Memorial Park and just make it all park? Because there is a small monument to Vietnam vets there at Memorial Park. Why does this one stand on its own?
So the reason why it's located in Papillion in Sarpy County is because Mayor Black with the city council approved to lease us land for $1 a year at $50 or 50 for 50 years. Mm-hmm. So we were able to build, and when we kind of presented the mayor with that plan, he was like, absolutely build it in my community. So Papillion is very veteran oriented as a city. Of course, obviously with Offutt Air Force being so close by, the mayor absolutely loves everything veterans based. So he went back to city council approved it, and so we got the land, and that's why we put it there. But it's actually representing the entire state of Nebraska. So we've reached out to like Scotts Bluffs and people like that, and of course it's quite a distance drive, but just this weekend I was telling Fred on the way over here, we had a group 27 people come from Central City, Nebraska, which is about 3.5 hours away, something like that.
That's probably about right.
So, but mainly
they come specifically for. Yep. It wasn't anything like we're going to Omaha. Let's visit this while we're in town.
Nope, they specifically come to just go to the memorial, and they're actually, that group is planning on a fundraising ride next year coming up to the memorial.
And last year there was a Nebraska Vietnam Veteran Reunion, which I believe, unfortunately, this year is going to be the last one, but they've kind of alternated. This year it's going to be in Kearney, but it was in Lincoln last year, and we were able to bus up 2 or 3 busloads of Vietnam veterans to see the memorial. So, I mean, and again, it's so touching, the reactions, and talk about why Papillion, again, with Mayor Black being such a great partner. I'm not sure if that would have, if you've been out there, I'm not sure if that would have fit. There's some additional property where we're looking at building an education center, a structure. So, being on the hill in Papillion, it's where it belongs, I think.
So you're not done with it yet, huh?
Nope. So we have future plans, looking to build an education center that people can actually come into. I always have these grandiose ideas. I want it to be interactive so that we can use our K through 12 programming and get high school and students in there to be able to touch, feel, smell, and realize what was actually going on during that time. So that's a couple years out, but we definitely have it in mind. We're starting to talk about it a lot more, and hopefully we can get that done, and that'll give us an office space right there on the site. And it's also really close to the Omaha National Cemetery too. So that's another real big highlight, is it's right there. So if someone's coming to visit their loved ones at the Omaha National Cemetery, they can come right over to the Vietnam Memorial. And
370 is the Strategic Air Command Memorial Highway. So, I mean, from Offutt to veterans area that Papillion has, the memorial and National Cemetery. What a great,
And you're open from sunrise to sundown, right?
Sunrise to sundown, yep.
It's free and no charge, though.
No charge.
But bring your smartphone to check out the QR codes, to get the history and learn about these people. The walls there, and that's another thing that I noticed about, that was interesting about your memorial. If you go to the wall in D.C., there's just all the names are there, right? But on your wall, it's like the pictures and individual years. These are the soldiers that died, in 1964, 1965, 1966. And you can see how the war developed just by the number of casualties that you see on the wall.
Well, the early involvement was kind of top secret. They were advisors. We didn't have troops in Vietnam, but we did. And then it escalated from there. So, and you had made a comment earlier about seeing it on the way to a Storm Chasers game. It's also pretty cool to see it after a Storm Chasers game
at night,
because until the city closes out the parking lot, there is access to it. And I think last year, first week after the dedication, I left the Storm Chasers game and thought, I just want to see this at night, and it's beautiful.
I have no doubt.
It's amazing. And there's actually a photographer that had caught it during a storm with a lightning strike kind of behind the chopper. And, those prints are still available on the website. So it's a special place.
You mentioned the advisors that they had in the early days of the war, which reminded me, although this is a Vietnam Veterans Memorial, what about soldiers who died in Cambodia? Because we weren't there either.
Yeah. So we recognize, I'll just tell this story really quick. We recognize 4 people from the USS Evans, which was actually in Vietnam, went to resupply into the Philippines, get some new troops on board, and then they got sent off to do a training exercise with the Australians. Well, it was outside the boundaries of Vietnam water and international waters, and they collided with the USS Melbourne. And it killed 74 soldiers or sailors, and 4 of them were from Nebraska. 3 of them were brothers, the Sage brothers. And so they all died. Well, they're not considered Gold Star, nor are they recognized on the National Memorial. So we decided, well, that international line and deciding whether you're in combat or not is stupid. So we're going to include these 4 on our walls. And we did. And we have actually a whole thing dedicated to all the crew members there, a black wall dedicated to them. Because the guys that died in Cambodia that they've figured out, and they go, hey, he probably died in Cambodia or Laos. And there's mostly our special operations guys. They do identify them and have them on the national wall.
Oh, they do? Okay.
They do, yeah. So that changed as when they started declassifying some of that stuff. That started to change and be recognized that, hey, they were killed overseas instead of MIA.
One last thing that I noticed here, you're wearing a bracelet.
Yeah.
People that I don't know, some are listening, just listening to it, but we're also on camera. Hold up your arm there. Let me that bracelet there. It has a soldier's name on it, right?
Yep.
Is that a missing in action? Is that?
No, this is my battalion commander. He was shot down in Iraq and crashed and killed with 7 other people and one of my other buddies. And so I just wear it because they called him the senator because he was a gentle guy. He was a very strict battalion commander. But he was a gentle guy, and he was a good mentor and a leader, and I've always worn his bracelet. It keeps me calm when I need it.
Nice. Okay, so that's from your war, because there was POWMI bracelets out during the Vietnam War that a lot of civilians wore, and that was a real thing, wearing those bracelets. But that is from your service.
Yep, from when I over in Iraq. I mean, I lost a lot of guys, but between Afghanistan and Iraq, but he was always a strong mentor to me. So thankfully, we don't have the POW problems that we do. Again, technology, things that we learned from Vietnam. We don't have POW issues like we had in Vietnam. There's 1,500, I think, still missing that need to be repatriated. Thank God we don't have that problem in our generation.
One other thing that is somewhat related to this that I don't know a lot of people know about, over at Offutt, they have the unit that actually goes and identifies the remains of missing in action people that never came back, but they have gone, and not only from Vietnam but other wars, or they will go and they will check out the DNA, and they will from time to time be able to connect somebody and say, this was, your father or your uncle, this was your grandfather.
Yep.
And I've been fortunate enough to visit that, and it's
cool. It's a wild place.
It is. It's amazing what they're doing, and that technology is being done right here in Omaha.
Yep. So
or Bellevue, yeah.
DPAA. They're actually hosting a event. Their national convention is here in Omaha this year. So they're actually taking, I believe it's about 175 families of POW MIA from Vietnam up to our memorial to go view it and have a social event up there. So they're actually coming here June, I believe.
You said have a social event.
Yep.
Could a convention come and have a picnic at your place or something like that? So you do stuff like that too?
Well, if someone wants to make a large group outing, we'll be there with staff to support it. So, yep.
It's wonderful. I do mean this. This, like I said, I'd never been. I'd heard about it. I'd never been, but I will be back because I didn't have time to check everything out the way I would like when I was there last, because it really is it is a very cool place to check out and to learn about a little bit about history. As you said, those that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it.
That's right.
And you talked about all the turmoil, like Chuck Hagel was talking about in that. I often wonder what the 60s would have been like if we had 24-hour news channels, if we had smartphones, if we had Twitter and Facebook and talk radio. What would that have been like?
Wow.
I mean, because
That's a scary thought in a way.
It really is. It really is. Because that, as tumultuous a time that we're living in right now, that era was, I think, much more so than today. And hopefully we don't progress to that level. But I think it's more in our face today than it was back then because of all the technology and because of social media.
People are maybe have grown accustomed to a more dangerous society. Not saying that that there's not dangers out there, but you think of the assassination of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, and just I think there's a lot more protection for public figures these days, and unfortunately, they're needed. I mean,
I'll tell you, fascinating conversation. I really do appreciate you gentlemen coming out here. Make sure you go and check out the memorial. It's again 108th and 370, right?
Yep, just south of it.
Just south of it there. You'll see the sign right there by Sumter Amphitheater. You see the signs of Sumter Amphitheater, and you'll go and you can't miss it. And it's well worth your time. Now that the weather is getting nice, well worth your time to go and visit and to learn. And pay respect to those who sacrificed for their country.
Yeah.
No matter how you felt about the war, those men deserve your respect. And until next time, I want to thank those at Vanna Garage. Make sure you like the Becca's Talking Facebook page. Also, I didn't mention this earlier. I should have. We've got a YouTube channel where you can catch up on all of the old episodes of Becca's Talking. So check out the YouTube channel where you can go and see some of the podcasts you may have missed. Spread the word. Tell your friends. Thanks for joining us at the Becca's Talking podcast channel. Take care and bye, y'all.